Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So finally I had a little bit of time to sit down and go through everything that's been released over the last, was it 2 days now, with all the updates with Path of Exile 2 and also Path of Exile 1. That'll be the next video that comes out. Apologies for the really bad camera. It's just I need to buy a new mobile camera for when I'm recording away. But anyway, so we got a bit of an insight into the new crafting socketables in Path of Exile 2 that are coming out. So in 0.2.1, we're getting 22 new runes, which is going to be pretty good. And based on what I can see, it's a much better direction moving forwards and addresses some of the major issues that sort of currently exist in the game. But so basically, they're planning to deploy the patch. I think they said they were going to deploy it at the end of this week. So we got what Friday is what 1 to 2 more days away. But they basically said they'll be adding a plethora of new crafting socketables in the end game. The socketable system is one of the many crafting systems available in Path of Exile 2, obviously. The idea is for them to help you out during your campaign progression, to fill out any missing attributes or resist that you might be lacking. I guess looking at it from this perspective is quite a really simplistic look at it. Artificer orbs aren't necessarily very obtainable in your first run through. So while in theory this makes sense, it really doesn't. And the problem with the balance right now is where does this go from an active market scenario for trading and stuff like that versus the drop rates in SSF? Because inevitably, if you increase the drop rates of artificer orbs, and they're still really not worth anything at the moment, but if you increase the drop rates of things like that for SSF to accommodate for that, then that's going to make trade markets absolutely worthless, and you're just going to be looking at ridiculous trade volume metrics. But anyway, that's another issue entirely. We're going to focus on the positives here. After you've progressed into endgame and fill out those stats in your gear, and currently the gear is, you know, depends on how much you invest in gear at the end of the day. I think there are things that should be done in the skill tree a little bit better to be able to accommodate these sorts of resistance modifiers and things like that, especially life, which is problematic. But basically, they're saying once you've invested into gear, they can be swapped out for different stats like damage or defense so that you can min-max your character. However, one of the issues that they currently have is that socketable crafting system is that by the time you get to the end game, there really isn't anything new or exciting to find to replace your old runes. It's very true. And the other problem is like because Ultimatum got easier, and you could get the rarer runes from there. Basically, that devalued those runes as well. So that's somewhat a little bit problematic. To make that mechanic sort of worth farming, you need something that's really cool and an increase to the drop pool. The other thing is the socketables off of doing the I'm just going to call it the bestiary 2.0 mechanic in the game. Basically is just lackluster, and also the mechanic itself is somewhat frustrating to run. So there was really no purpose to doing that. I was at Atsmiri Wisps, yeah. The mechanic itself really was quite lackluster. So like it's slow to proc in a map number one when you just want to boom down the map, and the other part of it is like the drop rates and the mods on that pool, when they should be really cool sort of socketables, were just not very good. So hopefully this addresses a number of those issues. In 0.2.1, we are adding 22 new runes. All of these runes will be world drops only, which means you won't be able to upgrade any existing runes to get them. Here are a few examples that speak for themselves. I hope they add a lot more to this because this does give build variety. But anyway, so we've got Hedge Witch Assandra's Rune of Wisdom, +1 to level of all spell skills. This is really good. Like, I don't know if things like Magma Barrier are +1, or potentially there are other combinations we could run with that, like Magma Barrier with a wand or something like that. But realistically, that could be a really cool thing that you could do. But right now, like I'm playing a character, a warrior that uses spell skills, for example. So if you roll +2, like there's no limit to this mod. So you could do, +2, which in endgame terms is obscene levels of damage scaling, which is fantastic. If you're running a stave build, like you could get like +3 or potentially something even crazier or higher. If you're really lucky, I don't know if you can get +4 on a stave. Potentially you might be able to. If you could do that, you could just stack these into your item instead of running flat damage and run the gambit as to whether or not flat damage is better versus +1. But I guess in wand and staves too, this is more meaningful because basically there is no real modifier on those types of items that does exponentially increase damage the same way that straight +1 to skills do for spells as it currently stands. So this is actually quite a good change to the game, and I really hope they do this with a lot of other things. I hope they do this with minion skills. I hope they do this with like even melee fizz skills and stuff like that. This would be really cool because gem level scaling tends to be the best way to scale damage in PoE is despite getting like, if you're playing spear builds, you get a high DPS spear. You usually want to have like plus whatever level to the skill that you're playing as your primary skill. This one's a big one. 5% increase to movement speed. Now, one of the biggest issues with the game currently is movement speed is just not good. And I hope they actually make this a lot more. I hope they increase this more. So 5% really isn't very much in the grand scheme of things. It's definitely going to make the game a lot more fun. And actually, looking at this, you could get +2 on your boots. So, or +2 rune sockets on your boots. So you could get 10% movement speed modifier, which actually is going to make the game a lot better. I still think we need things like Quicksilver charms, for example. So the old Quicksilver flask out of PoE 1, and that would make the game significantly better. But then you have to deal with like charm socket. People are just going to run perpetual charm sockets and stuff like that that just keep generating charges for charms. I don't actually think that's a bad thing. If you invest into that, you should get the benefit from it. And then you could have like Mad Lad levels and movement speed on bow skills and stuff like that. To be honest with you, the way that the game currently feels, it feels like it was designed to be a much faster paced game, and that goes back to the original PoE 2 footage that we saw, but they just did not want to go that direction. For whatever reason, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And when you start, like when you hit a movement speed shrine, for example, the game feels fun. It's amazing. It feels good. The problem with the game as it currently stands is movement speed is just like an artificial limiter that was just an unnecessary design choice to simply slow the player down for the entire duration of their gameplay experience with whatever character they're playing. I feel like that is not the best direction to take, and adding things like this in indicates to me that they may also be aware of this. And so basically, they're finding ways through gear to correct some of these design choices. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 6 months we see max rolls on boots go from 30 to 35% to like 40 to 45% or some number like that to basically compensate for the fact that right now movement speed is not very good. The other thing they could do is just incrementally increase the base movement speed on characters overall, but it also means they have to change the pacing of bosses and all sorts of stuff like that, which creates a bit of a problem with how the game's currently designed, and it'd probably require a fair bit of rework of the game because then you just outpace the bosses technically, but you would be much better off when you're farming packs and mobs and rare monsters and things like that. All these things are all things that, would be interesting to see where they go with, but this is a good inclusion to the game. I'll probably be running these in every single build for the extra 10% movement speed that I can get on a +2 rune socket roll. Um, the Great Wolf's Rune of Willpower, so 10% of damage is taken from mana before life. This would be really good on mana stacking builds, and there's actually a mana stacking Thorns support gem, I think. Or Origem maybe. It's like, I can't remember what it's called. But like the thing that comes to mind would be like a Titan that does mana stacking with Thorns, for example. And because you get the hulking mass node or whatever it's called, basically you could amplify the effects of mana stack and then do more thorns damage based on that mana stacking. And something like this would be really cool because then with a bigger mana pool, you could just run a crazy amount of this stuff on your body armor and then just do absolutely stupid amounts of mana recovery and whatnot and stuff like that to compensate for damage inbound. This would actually be a really good damage mitigator on like, you know, warrior builds, to be honest with you. But also you get the advantages if you're the Sork or the Witch or whatnot. So mana is definitely something that you could look at as a more sort of defensive layer mechanic to start mana stacking again, because they really did hurt mana stacking in Archmage when they did put out the patch and just nuked Archmage builds into the dirt. So this is a good inclusion. I sort of like this. Then we've got, this is one of the new chaos, 14 new soul cores. So this drops from, yeah, Takati's Soul Core of Affliction. Soul Cores can be found. Yeah, so this drops from Ultimatum or the Chaos Trials. So enemies you curse have negative 8% Chaos resistance. This, I think, was a mod in Path of Exile 1, and this is very powerful. So any build running Chaos, like Ritualist or anything like that, this is actually going to be the go-to. You used to be able to get this built into modifiers onto items, in particular Delve drops and stuff like that. So this is actually quite a good mod. And you're probably going to see chaos builds pop off a lot more because I don't think anybody really realizes what negative 8% chaos resistance is. Usually most enemies you end up fighting have like 0% chaos res or very minimum levels of chaos resistance. And as a result of that, it makes chaos skills a lot more potent and volatile. The only problem with Path of Exile 2 is how they scale. If you've got negative percent chaos resistance on an enemy, that's going to amplify your damage by a ridiculous sum. And in fact, over the course of PoE 1 and many, many builds that came out over the years, this is such a modifier that was just incredibly powerful. So this is actually going to feed into the development of a lot of really cool and interesting builds, I feel. Then we've got Talisman of Thraldana. So martial weapon, a 25% reduced poison duration. Targets can be affected by +1 of your poisons at the same time. This is really good because there is a weapon that does this. It's a spear, but it's not the best weapon at the end of the day. I feel like this would allow you to play like mace poison builds a lot more effectively and stuff like that. Like poison's already not too bad in its current form, but you could actually play it on different build archetypes and things like that outside of like Pathfinder. You can make something really cool with this. But yeah, I think this is a really good inclusion. And also like if you can do this on martial weapons, then you can chuck quite a number of sockets into a martial weapon at the end of the day. Was it up to a total cap of 3? Something like that. Yeah, I think it's 3 for a two-handed weapon, 2 for a one-handed weapon. So basically, yeah, that like stacking multiple poisons on melee damage or something like that's really cool. I think this is really good. I like these sorts of gem setups. So they've got here, as you can see from the crafting socketables we've shown above, the power ceiling from socketables is being raised as these are also intended to be valuable chase drops. You shouldn't expect to find these trivially. These are rare and they're intended to be mid to long-term character upgrades that you can do incrementally. See, they say that, but the problem is they're going to add in a lot of different stuff and we're probably going to find it's a lot more trivial with the way that endgame players are playing the game than what they're trying to pitch here. I think like, we're just going to be like, if we're given the access for more power, then we're going to scale our builds exponentially. And the problem with that, with the current way the game's designed, like you're just going to nuke the end game. And that's already happening right now. This is just going to exacerbate that issue. Do I think this could fix a number of builds with some of the runes that are coming in? Potentially, this could actually alleviate some of the issues with some of the underperforming skills in the game. I hope they put in some runes here that address like mana sustain issues and whatnot. Do I think this is the best solution to balancing skills and balancing the skill tree better? I feel like they're using the rune system now as a stopgap to correct for where there are problems with the current version of the game. And this feels like somewhat of a band-aid patch. Is it going to be a long-term thing? Well, in Path of Exile 1, for anyone who knows, they did like take away a lot of threshold jewels and stuff like that over time as the game sort of got mature and developed a lot more. And what we may find is for right now, they may add these in, but they may eventually add cluster jewels in and all sorts of stuff like that, which basically would nullify some of the need for these things. But at this current point in time, I think these are actually pretty good inclusions into the game overall. Like, they're definitely going to make the game a lot more fun at the end of the day. Anyway, I just want to do I was going to say quick video, but it's a 14-minute video talking about these. I'm really liking these changes that I'm seeing currently because it's giving player power back and it's making it feel more like a Path of Exile game. And I know there's a market of players out there that think that this is a Souls-like game, and I'm just going to candidly say this is not a Souls-like game. It's a Path of Exile game, and things like this is what makes it a Path of Exile game, and it makes it fun at the end of the day. Anyway, if you like this type of content or video, don't forget to like and sub to the channel. I'm going to have a few videos out tonight, and I am working on another builds curation of creators. I do have 5 already picked out. I just haven't had any time to finish editing it, but that'll probably be out on the weekend at this stage. Anyway, I'll see you guys later and have a good one.